What makes a game worth it? We've all asked ourselves this question, now maybe not verbally or even consciously, but every time we buy or not buy a game, even those that are free to play, we always wonder, is this game worth it? Is this game worth your time, your money, your emotional investment, and many other things? The funny thing is, with how far games have come, especially by 2025, answering that question is not so simple. You might say, well, I'm not spending more than $70 for a game because that is way too expensive. No game is worth that kind of money. Well, then, I guess some of the biggest AAA games definitely had their head up their ass because, yeah, there's no way those games are worth the money. Now, on the other end, one might say, well, if a game is less than $20, $30, then that game has probably questionable quality, like the graphics are not as good, so maybe that's not worth it either. So, what? Are we saying that all games that are 40 to 60 USD are games that are worth it? I guess no, because not every game that's 40 to $60 are universally praised. So, with that in mind, price then is not a clear-cut factor for what makes a game worth it. Well then, how about playtime? Back in the day, an RPG like Final Fantasy VII would range from 40 to 80 hours, depending if you focused on just the story or if you also did the side content. Nowadays, you can see the number 20 to 30 hours being mentioned as a good or decent playtime for a game, which is a pretty good benchmark. Now, that, however, would be in conjunction with its price, right? Because maybe a game that is worth 20 to 30 hours long should not cost more than $40, right? Well, RE4 Remakes Gold Edition will cost about 40 to 50 depending on your storefront, and if you speedrun that game, you can finish that game in less than 3 hours, and at most maybe 20. And then you have RPGs like Baldur's Gate 3 and Persona 5 that can go upwards of 80 to 100 hours for roughly the same price as Resident Evil 4. So, does that mean then that one is more worth it than the other in terms of playtime with conjunction to its price? I don't think so. If that were the case, wouldn't multiplayer games then be more worth it than single player games? Especially the free to play ones like Fortnite. Outside of Fortnite and free to play games, there are games like Helldivers 2, and especially if you have a good chunk of friends to play it with, and of course, if the game's updates hook you on for the long haul, you can sink thousands, if not hundreds of hours for a game you purchased once. Now, of course, a counter argument, however, well, what about a game like web fishing that costs less than $4? And again, depending on your region and storefront, that can even be way less, or just a little bit more. And with a dedicated group of friends, you can sink the same amount of time as you would sink into Helldivers 2. So, after that much yapping, this Fox is nowhere near to even coming to a clear answer for that question, what makes a game worth it? Well, if you look at your library of games, you will also notice that you kind of contradicted yourself. Because there are some games that, yeah, there are similarities. There are games that cost roughly $30 to $40. The playtime ranges from about 30 to 50 hours. But then there are some games that cost less than that, cost more than that. They play longer and shorter than that. Some of them are even of a different genre. Some of them are multiplayer. Maybe less of them are multiplayer, more are solo. Or maybe the other way around. More of them are multiplayer and only some of them are solo. So again, it's not very simple. And to even add to that, some of these games are very, very different in genre. It's not like a turn-based RPG, an action RPG, a classic RPG. No, it can be all the way from it's a racing game and it's Animal Crossing. Those are two very different genres, and yet you absolutely love them. And in your eyes and in your mind, both games are absolutely worth it. And maybe some of these games, even, you haven't played more than once. You've played it just once, and then you're done. But you're like, thumbs up, worth it, 10 out of 10. And maybe there are some games, no matter how short or how long, you have fun the first, second, third, fourth, umpteenth time you've played the game. Which means, honestly, up until this point, there's only one thing that is certainly clear. What makes a game worth it is really more subjective than objective. Because no matter what people say online, or even what your friends tell you, no one can ultimately, definitively tell you what makes a game worth it, at least for you. Even a game's score sometimes is not relevant or not important for you. Because maybe even if a game is a 10 out of 10, you look at some playthroughs, or even your first impression is like, nah, it's not my vibe. It doesn't look like my kind of game. And then you see a game that's like 7.58 out of 10. Even just looking at like the trailer or like the launch video of it, you're like, wow, I want to play this right now. And to use a food metaphor, it's like choosing between a fine steak or a nice chicken with rice. Even if you could afford both, for some reason, you'd rather have the chicken with rice. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's not like the steak suddenly sucks or the chicken with rice suddenly looks good. No, it's really a you thing, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Because I think when you are wondering if a game is worth it, the first thing you probably are not aware is that you ask yourself, what are games that I have played that I usually gravitate around, or I play, or I choose to purchase with the least amount of thought? Meaning, what kind of games do I play where I don't even have to think, is it worth it? So maybe it is a game with a character creation system. It doesn't matter if it's a shooter, if it's an RPG, if it's an adventure game. No, you just like the idea of being able to create your own character in a game. Now, perhaps it is a co-op game. You absolutely love co-op games, or games with a co-op mechanic in it, and you are absolutely sold on the idea. Maybe you love RPGs than you do shooters. So if a game is an RPG, you don't even think about the setting, the plot, the art style, the graphics. No, you just love RPGs that much. Totally okay. Now, perhaps you like comfy and chill games than you do action games. So those kinds of genres also, for you, just naturally you want to play right now without a second thought. So, that having been said, what if you have an urge to try something new, right? Earlier we mentioned, well, if you know what you are familiar with, that can help you gauge, is this game worth it? But what if it is a game that is completely new? What if you've played every single RPG out there? There are a lack of games with a character creation system recently, so nothing has caught your attention and nothing has satisfied you. And now you want to go into uncharted territory and try a genre you have never tried. You don't want to take a big risk, and you see something like Red Dead Redemption 2 that is very hefty in price, but you cannot help but hear the acclaim and praise everyone has for it. Nowadays, however, you are quite unlucky because game demos are not exactly a thing. Now, back then, back when demos even were common, most people usually ask their friends, hey, can I borrow your copy of this game for like the weekend? I'll give it back to you because I'm thinking of buying it, but I want to see if it's exactly what's up my alley. Now, of course, there are some things like that that we can use today, like Steam Family Share, that sort of emulates that. But not everyone has that luxury. So, outside of that, you could do what most people do nowadays, I think. Instead of spending what is effectively an arm and a leg for something um Silent Hill 2 remake or a Resident Evil game, you probably will try something in the same genre that's more forgiving in price. So you decide to get Signalis instead. That is a safer choice. It does cost money, but at least the price is lighter on your purse. Now, if price is not an issue, then it has to be something else. So maybe you have played a lot of action-adventure games that you've sunk hundreds and thousands of hours playing. So you may like games by Bethesda, games by BioWare, RPG games or action-adventure games where you get to explore a big map with really nice areas, lots of quests, lots of characters, and you see something like Baldur's Gate 3, it's not exactly very similar to Mass Effect, Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Dragon Age. It's more of a classic RPG. But you can't help it. You're curious. You see so many people praise it. You see how many awards it has, and you see the price tag, and you're like, that's pretty affordable. It's not exactly AAA price, but that's something I actually can afford. So that is exactly also what you can do. You look at a game that is in a similar genre, even if it's in a genre that is completely different from what you are familiar with. It doesn't even have to be something as low as $10 like Signalis. It can be something pricier like Baldur's Gate 3, but because of the amount of praise it has, you are a lot more convinced okay, maybe this really is worth it, even though it's not exactly my kind of game, right? Because of course, compared to games like Mass Effect, Dragon Age, Fallout, Elder Scrolls games, action adventure games with RPG elements, the CRPG elements of Baldur's Gate 3 is more focused on Dungeons and Dragons, which is in the simplest form rolling the dice. But of course, as someone who has played Baldur's Gate 3, it's more than that. But of course, from the outside looking in, that's probably what most people will see. All you're doing is rolling the dice. How is this game worth it? Now, of course, to answer the question, what makes a game worth it? We are still trying to answer that. Truly, it comes from you. Of course, not to disrespect what your friends may say, what professionals might say, and what other people may have opinions on these games you are trying to wrap your hand around. Is it worth it? Because even a game that everyone will not stop talking about honestly may not be worth your time and money. No matter how much of a masterpiece it is, you can see the scores and wow, I am looking at these scores and they are all so high. So there has to be okay, it has to be that good. You look at the price and you're like, wow, it's very affordable. You look at the playtime and you're like, wow, if I play just the main content, it's not too long. But if I want to sink so much time, I can. Wow. Despite all that, it can still not be worth your time for your own reasons that you are probably not even aware of or you don't fully understand. And that is why it's such a hard question to answer, right? Maybe the genre itself is just way too far from your bias because you like games like Breath of the Wild, generally, action-centric games. You like that sense of control. You don't like the performance of the character on screen to be left to RNG. So RPG games are not immediately appealing to you. But then you see a game like Clair Obscur and you are very curious, like, wow, a turn-based RPG in 2025, and people are praising it. But I don't like turn-based RPGs. I like being able to control the outcome. Like, if I die, it's because I suck, not because I got unlucky. Now, of course, not to turn this into a Claire Obscure Expedition 33 video. Thankfully, that game does have mechanics for people who like that kind of control. Now, of course, you would not know that if you did not do some research. And honestly, that is one of the things you can do, right? Because when you ask your friends, is this game worth it? There are usually a lot of factors that come into play that sometimes you are not even aware of. You ask like friend A because friend A has the exact same benchmark or criteria for what makes a game worth it, right? You practically have the same library, you talk about the same games, you play the same games. So if you see them play Expedition 33, you're like, maybe it is worth it. But then again, no matter how similar your bias is, ultimately, you cannot be 100% sure. So, my advice is, yes, number one, you ask people who share the same views as you do because you can trust them. And then number two, you go practically Ace Attorney mode. You take a second opinion, third opinion, like maybe from someone who has your similar biases but is more open-minded, so they like something from a racing game all the way to an RPG game, puzzle games, action games, shooter games, chill games, everything. And then you take someone's opinion who likes nothing but RPGs, like RPGs are their bias. You take all of these opinions, as many opinions and feedback as you can, and cross-reference, like how many of them share the same amount of praise, what are their complaints, and then you put it in a nice little list of like, okay, so they're complaining about this, but I like this kind of element about this game. So yeah, they do complain about it, but I love this. And then you see something like, oh, they're praising this, but I don't like the idea of this mechanic in this game. That's where you are able to gauge all of a sudden, like, I'm starting to see how this game can actually be worth it, or I don't think it's worth it. Because at the end of the day, we already made it clear earlier, a game's score, like if 100 people say it sucks, or 100 people say it rules, sometimes you still buy a game regardless, and sometimes you skip a game regardless. After all, I mean, almost perfect means it's not perfect. In conclusion, only you can truly say what makes a game worth it. I know that is very frustrating, because to be fair, it is a frustrating question. But honestly, this is the most honest way to really evaluate a game. Because nowadays, despite what I have shared on stream about my thoughts on every game I have played on stream and off stream, I always encourage all of my Foxtrots, my community, and you, the viewer, to formulate your own opinion. Because, again, even if I tell you a game is worth it, and you say, well, it was a waste of time, it was not worth it, what am I going to do? I shared you my thoughts. You banked on my thoughts being correct, but unfortunately it is wrong. What are you gonna do? Blame me? Because, number one, I can't be wrong, because in the sense that I think it's a good game, because if I thought it was not a good game, I wouldn't recommend it to you. But at the same time, you can't be wrong either, because you honestly did not think it was a good game. And this is where you really cannot blame anyone but yourself. And that is very frustrating. And the least you can do to avoid that frustration is to mitigate that frustration by, like I said earlier, get as many opinions as you can and try to reduce the amount of risk in getting a game. So, for example, like I mentioned earlier, you can't help but, because of the whole discourse of Arthur Morgan being one of the best video game characters ever made, you're like, okay, I have never played a Rockstar game, and I want to play Red Dead Redemption 2. And you look at the price and you're like, oh crap, it's so expensive. So, what you can do is literally everything I have suggested. Maybe try to look for a game that's as similar as possible to Red Dead 2, that's more affordable in price, and see if, okay, this kind of game is something I can play. So I'll pick up Red Dead 2 when it's on sale, because that's way too expensive, but now I'm curious. Or you can find people you know, or streamers, YouTubers, as many videos as you can from sources you vibe with, you trust, and see how many of them have similar takes, similar complaints, similar everything, because you're like, okay, we share the same ideals. They keep saying that Red Dead 2 is a must play. You know what? Because many of the sources I believe, I trust, keep saying it's worth it, keep saying it's must play, then that means I must play. It really takes effort to answer that question, what makes a game worth it? So proportionally, you also have to exert the same amount of effort to try and figure out what makes a game worth it. Because ultimately, if you want to try new games, because this is really when the question pops up. You maybe played Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Persona. You see a game like Clair Obscur, you're like, well, I played RPGs, I love RPGs, so this must be worth it. But if you are coming from that background and you are trying a genre that you have never played, there is that risk. Answering that question, is this game worth it, is suddenly so difficult. You have to be very diligent and exert effort to really figure out, is this game worth it? There is always that risk, no matter how much effort you exert to mitigate the chances of you being disappointed. It will always never be 100%. There is no guarantee, but you can do your best so that it's close to, like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be disappointed. Because you may end up not liking a game. But when you nail it and find a game that you like, you may end up broadening your horizons, opening a new door to a genre that suddenly you're like, wow, this genre is actually something I vibe with, something I love, something I would love to play now. And of course, that will not realistically and consistently happen if you don't exert effort. And that's honestly, at the end of the day, the most demanding part of the question. I wish you luck in figuring out if a game comes up in your recommended list or on your feed and you're wondering, is it worth it? I wish you luck. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Have a good day and have a fun time gaming, everyone.